I started by running a routine resurvey of the Drayton parcel last month for a water permit. The boundaries on the original 2017 sale didn't close cleanly. I thought it was rounding error. I ran it again. I pulled the township section maps from the Bureau of Land Management. I pulled your grandfather's original deed and overlaid it on the developer survey. He turned the first printout around so we could read it. Bo, the Drayton parcel, the 80 acres that became Elkridge Estates, is short by 312 feet on the western boundary. The original surveyor put the line 312 feet east of where it actually is. That means 13 of the 50 houses in Elkridge Estates are partially on Tanner land, some by 10 feet, some by 60. He paused. The Mallister house sits 87 feet onto your western pasture. I didn't say anything. Hattie put her hand on my knee. It gets worse. Holt turned over the second printout. The original surveyor on the 2017 sale was a man named Lester Greaves. I pulled his license. He is not a licensed Montana surveyor. He has never been. He holds a forged license issued out of a strip mall in Salt Lake City. Calvin Drayton paid him $187,000 for the survey work. The payment went through a Cayman Islands shell company. The receiving account was a checking account in Greaves's wife's maiden name. Hattie said very quietly, "Holt, how do you know that?" Holt's face moved a quarter of an inch. He looked at me. "Bo, I have a friend at the Montana AG's office. I've known her 31 years. I called her last week. She pulled the records. She is on her way to Bozeman as we speak." He turned over the last printout. "And one more thing, Whiskey Creek Trail. Your road, the license your father granted in 1984, it was permissive only, verbal. There is nothing recorded under Montana Code Section 70-17-109. You can revoke that license at any time. The developer's title insurance does not cover the road. The HOA does not have a deed easement. The 50 homes in Elkridge Estates have no legal right to cross your land. They never did." I sat at Holt Peaton's drafting table for a long minute. I felt the small, extraordinary thing a man feels when his father, dead 8 months, reaches across from wherever he went and hands him exactly what he needs. Cal had refused to sell the back 80 in 2017. He had been right. He had been right for reasons he didn't even know. The developer who tried to buy from him had gone on to commit a real property fraud worth millions of dollars on the land next door. The Tanner family had been protected by the same kind of patient stubbornness that built the ranch in 1923. The land had been waiting. So had my father. Hattie squeezed my knee. There were tears in her eyes she didn't let fall. "Holt," I said, "get me 3 certified survey copies. I need to make a phone call." Roy Brunsdale has been my family's attorney since 1990. 66 years old, 3 sharpened pencils in his shirt pocket, a Bible in the top drawer of his desk. When I called him from Holt's drafting table, he didn't ask me to repeat anything. "Bo, get to my office by 1. Bring Holt, bring the surveys, bring Hattie. I'll have Faye Sarno on the phone by the time you sit down." Faye Sarno was the senior investigator at the Montana Attorney General's Real Estate Fraud Division. She had once put a Bozeman developer in federal prison for 9 years on a similar scheme. She had grown up on a small ranch outside Big Timber. She had been waiting for Calvin Drayton for 6 years. We sat down at Roy's conference table at 1:05. The plan was 4 pieces. 1. A formal notice of revocation of permissive license, drafted by Roy, filed with the Park County Clerk and Recorder, hand-delivered to every household at Elkridge Estates by certified mail, with a 30-day notice period. 2. A formal notice of private road closure under Montana Code Annotated Section 714-2622, filed simultaneously, taking effect at the end of the 30 days. 3. A quiet title action filed in Park County District Court asserting Tanner ownership of the disputed 312-foot western strip, naming Calvin Drayton, Drayton Holdings, LLC, and the 13 affected homeowners as defendants. We notified the homeowners we intended no personal action against them, only against the developer. 4. A coordinated federal-state action by the AG's office and the FBI targeting Calvin Drayton, Lester Greaves, Brett Mallister, and Stacy Mallister for wire fraud, conspiracy to commit real property theft, forgery, and bribery of a public official. The Mallisters had bribed a Park County building inspector named Curtis Vetterly with $24,000 to look the other way during construction. Vetterly had been on Fay's watch list for 2 years.
The federal arrests would happen at sunrise on the morning the road closure took effect. The 30-day notice would expire on Saturday, October 12th at 6 a.m. Roy looked at me across the conference table. "Bo, are you ready?" I thought about Cal's empty rocking chair on the porch. I thought about Hattie's hand on my knee at Holt's drafting table. I thought about the pasture acres my grandfather had fenced in 1969 that 13 luxury homes were sitting on without paying. I thought about my father in the spring snow. "Roy, I'm ready." We filed the notice of revocation that afternoon. Certified copies went to 50 households on Friday morning. By Monday, every resident of Elkridge Estates had received written notice that Whiskey Creek Trail would close in 30 days under Montana state law. Stacy's first response was a Facebook post titled, "Aggressive Legal Tactics from Hostile Neighbor. Emergency Board Meeting Tuesday." Brett's first response was a phone call to a Manhattan law firm that charged him $1,800 an hour to write him a 6-page memo concluding that he was out of legal options. Calvin Drayton's first response was to fly to Aspen for what his secretary described as a long-planned vacation. Lester Greaves's first response was to drive to a sporting goods store in Salt Lake City and attempt to purchase a one-way ticket on a small commuter flight to Tijuana. The TSA flagged him within 20 minutes. None of them knew what we knew. I ordered the steel gate from a fabricator in Bozeman that same Friday. 12 feet wide, 7 feet tall, 3 padlocks, bolted to concrete piers Russ would pour the night before installation. Hattie made a pot of chili that evening, and the whole family ate together at the kitchen table. We didn't talk about the road. We talked about Cal. We laughed for the first time in 8 months. When everyone had gone to bed, I sat alone on the porch with Cal's coffee mug. The October air smelled like pine and dry hay, and the slow, patient ground of a county my family had ranched since 1923. Stacy Mallister's Facebook post that following Saturday, after the certified mail arrived, ran 28 paragraphs. She called me by name. She used words I won't repeat here. She implied things about Hattie that were not true. She implied things about Russ that were not true. She referenced Joanna by name and noted that she works at a public hospital and should be careful about her professional reputation. The post received 18 comments from HOA residents. 14 of them asked Stacy to take it down. One came from a 66-year-old former school teacher named Marjorie Piniella, who lived in the smallest house in Elkridge Estates and had voted against Stacy in the last HOA election. Marjorie wrote, "Stacy, this is wrong. The man has a deed. Take this down." Stacy deleted Marjorie's comment. Marjorie printed a screenshot. Then she drove out to my ranch the following Wednesday with a manila folder and a pan of apple pie. I let her in. Hattie poured her a glass of buttermilk. Marjorie sat at our kitchen table for 2 hours and told us everything she knew. Stacy had bribed the building inspector. Stacy had threatened 3 previous board members into resigning. Stacy had been diverting HOA dues into a personal account. Brett had paid Lester Greaves a consulting fee in 2017, his own money, not Drayton's, to fudge the survey line. Stacy and Brett had known the 50 homes were built on disputed land since the day they bought theirs. When Marjorie finished, Hattie reached across the table and held her hand. Marjorie cried. We let her cry. She gave us the folder. Inside, 6 months of HOA board meeting recordings she had been making in secret on her phone, 11 screenshots of Stacy's deleted Facebook posts, and a copy of a bank statement Stacy had accidentally emailed to the wrong distribution list. The statement showed 17 unauthorized HOA dues withdrawals into Stacy's personal account, totaling $41,000.
I gave the folder to Roy the next morning. Roy gave it to Faye Sarno by noon. By Friday, 6 days before the road closure, the federal investigation had quietly tripled in size. Stacy did not know. Brett did not know. Drayton, sunning himself in Aspen, did not know. On Thursday evening, the day before Russ was scheduled to pour the gate piers, Stacy called my wife at the elementary school. She told the school secretary that Mrs. Tanner needed to be informed there was a domestic situation at her home. The secretary called Hattie out of a third-grade classroom. Hattie listened to 37 seconds of screaming. Then she said very calmly, "Mrs. Mallister, I am recording this call on the school's PBX system. Every word will be in your indictment by Monday morning. Have a nice day." She hung up. She walked back to a third-grade classroom and finished the unit on Montana history. The unit, as it happened, was on the Homestead Act of 1862, the families who had walked west to claim 160 acres of nothing because nothing properly worked was the only thing that lasted. The third graders didn't yet understand the irony. Hattie did. She taught the lesson with a small, steady smile she didn't let leave her face. That night, she handed me the recording on a USB drive over dinner. "Bo, don't say a word. Just eat your pot roast." I did. Russ poured the concrete piers at sundown on Friday. I held the level. He worked the trowel. The piers cured under a tarp through the night. The temperature dropped to 28 degrees. Russ slept in the equipment barn to keep an eye on them. By 5 in the morning, the whole family was up. Joanna had driven in from Bozeman the night before. Hattie was at the kitchen counter packing sandwiches. Russ was loading the steel gate onto the flatbed trailer. Sheriff Coy Driscoll pulled into the yard at 5:15 with 2 deputies and 2 cruisers. Faye Sarno pulled in at 5:20 in an unmarked AG sedan. Roy Brunsdale arrived at 5:28 in his 1998 Ford F-150, wearing a wool coat, carrying a leather briefcase. He climbed into the cab of my pickup without asking. "Bo? Roy? I have been waiting on a case like this for 35 years. "I know it, Roy." Joanna kissed me on the cheek. Hattie squeezed my hand once. Russ climbed into his pickup with the gate on the flatbed. We drove the 3.2 miles down Whiskey Creek Trail to the entrance at the highway. We arrived at 5:45. There was a layer of frost on the cattle guard. The fence posts were silver in the moonlight. The valley to the east was beginning to glow, that particular pale, slow lift that comes before a Montana dawn, the kind my father had once described to me as the only proof we get that the day is going to come even if you don't want it to. Russ and I unloaded the steel gate. The 2 deputies helped. We dropped the frame onto the cured concrete piers and bolted it in place. Russ tightened every bolt twice. The gate hung perfectly. I hung the 3 padlocks one by one. The first was Cal's old combination lock from his tool chest. He had bought it at a hardware store in Livingston in 1971 and used it for 53 years on the equipment barn, the tack shed, the cabin he and my mother had built up at the back 40 during the summer she was pregnant with me. The combination was my mother's birthday, backward. I had carried it in my truck since the day he died. I hadn't known what I was going to do with it. I knew now. The second padlock was new, stainless steel, bought at Bozeman Tractor Supply the previous Thursday. The third was the one Cal had used on the original gate at the Tanner Cross brand entrance in 1986, the year he had handed me the deed. 3 padlocks, 3 generations, 3 keys. I closed the gate. I stepped back. It was 5:58 a.m. We waited 2 minutes in the dark. At 6:01, Coy Driscoll looked at his watch. He looked at me. He nodded once. I pulled out my phone. I dialed the after-hours emergency line at the Park County Clerk and Recorder. Tess Quincy picked up on the first ring. "Tess, it's Bo Tanner." "Bo, I'm at my desk, ready to record." "Tess, as of 6:02 a.m. on Saturday, October 12th, I am exercising my rights under Montana Code Annotated Section 7-14-2622 and Section 70-17-109.
The permissive license granted by Calvin Bowen Tanner in 1984 on Whiskey Creek Trail is hereby revoked. The road is closed to all non-Tanner traffic, effective immediately and permanently. A small pause on the other end of the line. Then Tess Quincy said the 4 words I had been waiting 93 days to hear. Recorded, Mr. Tanner. Stacy Mallister drove up to the gate at 7:46. She was driving the white Lexus. Brett was in the passenger seat. They'd heard from a neighbor's text at 7:30. She got out. She walked to the gate. She put her hands on the bars. She pushed. The gate didn't move. She pushed again. It still didn't move. She turned around. I was standing 6 feet behind the gate on the Tanner side. Coy Driscoll was standing 6 feet to my left. Roy Brunsdale was standing 6 feet to my right with his leather briefcase. Russ was leaning against the bed of his pickup with a cup of coffee. "Open this gate." I didn't move. "Open this gate right now. This is public access." Coy stepped forward. "Mrs. Mallister, this is a private road. It has been closed under Montana state law as of 6:02 this morning. I would advise you to return to your residence and contact your attorney." She kicked the gate with the side of her boot. The gate didn't move. She kicked it again. On the third kick, the heel separated from her boot. She didn't seem to notice. She kept screaming. Brett got out of the Lexus and put his hand on her shoulder. She shook him off. By 8:30, 23 Elk Ridge residents had driven up to the gate. Most looked once, turned around, and drove home. Marjorie Piniella drove up at 9:15 in her old Subaru. She walked to the gate with a paper bag and handed me a slice of apple pie through the bars. "Bo, thank you." "Marjorie, you should be at home." She smiled. "I am at home. This is the road home." She drove away. At 11:45, the first AG vehicle pulled in behind Stacy's Lexus. Faye stepped out in a black tactical vest with FBI letters across the back. 2 state troopers followed. They walked around the Lexus to the gate. "Stacy Mallister." "What?" "You are under arrest. Charges include wire fraud, conspiracy to commit real property theft, bribery of a public official, embezzlement from a homeowners association, and making false statements to federal investigators. You have the right to remain silent." She didn't understand the sentence the first time. She didn't understand it the second time. Faye said it a third time, slowly. The cuffs went on at 11:51 a.m. Brett Mallister was arrested in his Range Rover at 12:04, attempting to drive an 18-mile mountain trail out the back of Elk Ridge Estates in flip-flops. Calvin Drayton was arrested at 1:15 at a hotel pool in Aspen. Lester Greaves was arrested at 3:40 in Salt Lake City while picking up dry cleaning. Curtis Vetterly, the building inspector, surrendered himself at 5 p.m. By 6 o'clock, Whiskey Creek Trail was closed. 4 people were in federal custody. The slow, cold Montana sun was setting over Paradise Valley. The Absarokas to the east turned the pale rose color they always turn in October. A red-tailed hawk circled over the south pasture. 2 of my Angus heifers lay down in the dry grass and watched the valley fill with shadow. I stood at the gate. Roy Brundale walked up beside me. He didn't say anything. He had been my father's friend since high school. He had been mine for 35 years. We had stood together in courtrooms, in hospital rooms, in the funeral home in Livingston the week Cal died. But I don't think either of us had ever stood quieter than we stood at that gate that evening. We watched the valley go dark. Then we drove home. Hattie had a pot roast in the oven. The federal grand jury returned a 41-count indictment the following Tuesday. Stacy Mallister pleaded guilty to 7 counts, 8 years federal. Brett Mallister took 11 years for wire fraud, conspiracy, and bribery. Calvin Drayton took 14 years and was ordered to pay $7.8 million in restitution. Lester Greaves got 6 years and a lifetime ban on surveying. Curtis Vetterly cooperated and received 22 months. The Elk Ridge Estates HOA was placed under court-ordered receivership. Marjorie Piniella was elected the new president in a special election held 3 weeks after the road closure. She ran unopposed. Her first act was to drive to my ranch with another apple pie
and a handwritten letter from 41 of the 50 households apologizing for the entire affair. The legal settlement of the encroachment took 8 months. The 13 homeowners whose houses sat partially on my land negotiated through a court-appointed mediator a purchase price for the underlying parcels, an average of $184,000 per house. I priced the land at the agricultural rate Holt-Peton certified, plus a small premium for the legal trouble. I did not enrich myself. Every dollar was paid. The remaining 37 households negotiated a proper recorded access easement on Whiskey Creek Trail. Annual fee, $3,500 per household. The easement was contingent on good behavior, posted speed limits, and zero interference with Tanner Cross agricultural operations. The road remained closed for 46 days while the easements were negotiated. On the 47th morning, I unlocked the 3 padlocks, swung the gate open, and tied it back with a leather strap Cal had hung in the barn in 1971. The residents of Elkridge Estates drove past my ranch house at the posted speed of 15 miles per hour, the way they should have been driving for 4 years. Most of them waved. Marjorie Piniella honked twice. A small boy in the back seat of a Volvo stuck his hand out the window and held up a paper sign that said, "Thank you, Mr. Tanner." I waved back. Hattie waved beside me. Russ leaned against the porch rail and lifted his coffee cup to the passing Volvo. Joanna had driven back to Bozeman that morning, but she had stood on the porch with us for the first hour of cars.
3 generations of Tanners watching 50 households of strangers drive home properly, at the proper speed, on a road that finally had a properly recorded easement. I used a portion of the proceeds to incorporate the Cal Tanner Family Ranch Defense Fund, a 501c3 nonprofit that provides free legal representation, surveying support, and easement defense to small ranches in Montana, Idaho, Wyoming, and the Dakotas. The first staff member was Holt-Peton, who took semi-retirement to run the survey desk. By the end of the first year, the fund had represented 14 ranches. By the end of the second, 41. The fund's logo is a steel gate, open, with a black Angus cow standing in the gap looking out at a Montana mountain range. The gate is the one Russ built. The mountains are the Absarokas. The cow is real. She was the lead cow of our herd for 9 years, and we named her after my mother.
That night, on the porch in Cal's rocking chair, I finally went into the bedroom and started moving Cal's clothes. Slowly, one folded shirt at a time, into a cedar chest Russ had built for me that summer. Hattie sat on the bed and watched. She didn't help. She didn't need to. When I was done, I closed the chest. I sat down beside her. She put her hand on mine. "Bo, your father would be proud." I looked at the empty closet. The wooden hangers swung gently. The Stetson on the shelf was the only thing I had left in place. I decided somewhere in the long process of folding shirts that the Stetson would stay where Cal had put it. Some things you keep because they belong where they are. Some things you keep because the man who put them there has left a small, invisible weight against the wood. And to move the hat is to acknowledge that he is not coming back to wear it. I was not ready to acknowledge that. I don't know that I ever will be. I said, "Hattie, I think he would be home." I don't know if I said it because I felt him there or because I wanted to. The difference in the end didn't matter. Stacy Mallister didn't lose because someone was angrier than her. She lost because she didn't read the deed. The people who come to rural places in their soft shells and their Lexus SUVs and assume the quiet man down the road is too small, too old, too rooted to fight back. They are wrong every time. They assume money buys land. They assume volume buys time. They are wrong about both. The Tanner family had been on that ground for 100 years before Stacy Mallister was born. They had paid every tax bill. They had walked every fence line. They had buried 3 generations under their own pines. 93 days. That's how long I'd been waiting to make that phone call. I made it at 6:02 on a Saturday morning in October, standing at a brand new steel gate, the only road in or out of 50 luxury homes, with 3 padlocks in my hand, a county sheriff to my left, and my son to my right. When the woman on the other end of the line said, "Recorded, Mr. Tanner," Every car, every school bus, every delivery truck, and every white Lexus that had been crossing my family's land for 4 years had just lost the right to do it. The HOA president, who spent 2 years calling me a redneck, didn't know it yet. Here's what happened. My name is Bo Tanner. I've ranched 4,400 acres of Paradise Valley in Park County, Montana, since my father handed me the deed in 1986. He had taken it from his father in 1962. His father had bought the original quarter section from a railroad surveyor named Truman Yost in 1923, a man who'd been laid off by the Northern Pacific and decided he didn't want to look at the mountains anymore. The original survey still hangs in the front room of our ranch house. We run a small cow-calf operation, 212 head of Black Angus. My son Russ works the ranch with me. He's 33, came back from Bozeman the year my father started slowing down. My daughter Joanna is 29 and a nurse in Bozeman. My wife Hattie is 59 and a substitute teacher at Livingston Elementary. We've been married 38 years. My father Cal Tanner died last April, 81 years old, in his sleep, in his own bed, with spring snow falling outside the window. He had refused to sell the back 80 acres to a Bozeman developer named Calvin Drayton in 2017. He told Drayton on our front porch in a voice you could have heard in 3 counties, "Mister, my grandfather walked that land. My daddy died on it. My boy will ride it. You can offer me the moon, and I'll still tell you no." Drayton left. He never came back to talk to my father again. After Cal died, I kept his coffee mug on the porch table. I sat in his rocking chair most mornings before sunrise. I hadn't moved a thing in his closet. The same 6 work shirts on the same 6 wooden hangers, the same brown leather belt curled on the same nail, the same battered Stetson on the same shelf above the door. Hattie understood. Russ understood. Everyone in Park County understood. Cal Tanner had been the kind of man you don't pack away in a hurry. You wait until the land tells you it's time. The land hadn't told me yet. Drayton came back 6 months after the funeral. He stood on our porch in a Patagonia vest and soft leather boots that had never been near a horse. He offered me $1.4 million for the back 80. I told him the same thing Cal had told him. He left. Then he did the only thing he had left. He bought a different 80 acres from a neighbor named Pete Schaefer, who had retired to Florida and didn't much care what happened to the land. Drayton subdivided it into 50 luxury parcels, marketed it nationwide, and sold every lot. By spring of 2023, 50 households from Greenwich and Manhattan and San Francisco had moved into a gated community called Elk Ridge Estates. And the only road in or out of their cul-de-sac ran 3.2 miles across my family's ranch. The road is called Whiskey Creek Trail. It crosses a creek my grandfather named for a bottle he lost in it during the spring melt of 1924. It crosses pasture my father fenced in 1969 with his own 2 hands and the help of a Crow ranch hand named Earl Two Bear, who had ridden for Tanner Cross for 21 years. It crosses a hayfield my son and I cut every August. It has been Tanner land since 1923. There is no recorded easement on it. There never has been. My father had granted what Montana law calls a permissive license, a verbal courtesy, to a single neighbor in 1984 when that neighbor needed access for a small lodge that closed in 1997. The license was never written down. It was never paid for. Under Montana Code Annotated Section 70-17-109, permissive use does not create an easement, not in 5 years, not in 50. The Montana Supreme Court had affirmed that principle 3 times in the last 30 years. I knew because I had read all 3 opinions on the porch the week my father died. The new residents of Elk Ridge Estates didn't know any of this. The developer who sold them their homes hadn't told them. And the HOA president, a 48-year-old transplant from Greenwich, Connecticut, named Stacy Mallister, decided in her 2nd year on the board that she was going to fix that little inconvenience by turning my private road into a public one. That was the spring she started picking the wrong fight. Stacy Mallister walked up my driveway for the first time on a Tuesday morning in April. Patagonia soft shell, white turtleneck,
pearl earrings, sorrel boots that had never crossed a real pasture. She knocked on my screen door at 9:20 while I was finishing my second cup of coffee. "Mr. Tanner." "Mrs. Mallister." "Stacy, please." "Mrs. Mallister." The smile flickered for half a second and recovered. "I wanted to discuss the road that runs through your property to our community. We have 50 families now, school buses, delivery vehicles, postal trucks, contractors. As HOA president, I think it's time we formalize the access arrangement." "Formalize?" "A recorded easement. We will pay you, of course. The HOA has authorized a one-time payment of $50,000. I looked at her over the rim of my coffee cup. "Ma'am, that road is my road. The Tanner family has owned it since 1923. We have permitted people to use it as a courtesy. We have never given a recorded easement to anyone." "Mr. Tanner, with respect, the road has been used continuously for years. There is a legal doctrine called prescriptive easement." "Mrs. Mallister, with respect, I know what a prescriptive easement is. I was on the Park County Commission for 4 years. The use of that road has been permissive under Section 7017-109. Permissive use does not create a prescriptive easement. It never has. It never will." Her smile tightened. "Mr. Tanner, we would like to come to a reasonable accommodation." "Mrs. Mallister, I have allowed your residents to drive across my land for 4 years without charging a dime. That is the reasonable accommodation. It can continue on my terms for as long as I choose, or it can stop on my terms when I choose." I let her hear that sentence twice. She closed her folder. She walked back to her white Lexus. She drove off. 4 days later, the HOA monthly newsletter went out. The lead article was titled, "Working Toward a Permanent Solution to Our Access Concerns." My name appeared 3 times. The word obstinate appeared twice. The word redneck appeared once, in a quoted comment from an anonymous resident who, I would later learn, was Stacy Mallister herself. Hattie read the newsletter at the kitchen table that night and laughed. "Bo, redneck." "Yes, ma'am." "She knows you were on the county commission for 4 years." "She does not believe it. She thinks I spent 4 years on a tractor." "You spent some of them on a tractor. Most of them in a courthouse." Hattie kissed the top of my head and put the newsletter in the kindling box by the wood stove. A week later, I drove down Whiskey Creek Trail to check fence and found a wooden archway built across my road at the entrance. 8 feet tall, 12 feet wide. A hand-painted sign read, "Elkridge Estates, Private Community Access, Authorized Vehicles Only." I drove home. I came back with my pickup, a chainsaw, and Russ. Russ took one look at the archway and laughed. The short, hard laugh his grandfather used to laugh right before he said something polite. We cut the archway to its base in 14 minutes. The chainsaw was a steel that had been my father's. The cedar planks smelled like a craft store. We hauled the lumber to my burn pile by the equipment barn and left it. I drove back to the road entrance with a small wooden post and a hand-painted sign of my own. I'd cut the post from a section of lodgepole pine that had come down in a storm in 2022. I'd painted the sign in the equipment barn in under 30 minutes, using the same red barn paint my father had used for 50 years. The sign said, "This is my road, Bo Tanner." That was the message. That was all of it. Stacy Mallister called the Park County Sheriff's Office at 4:07 that afternoon. She told the dispatcher that the rancher next door had violently destroyed the HOA's community signage and was actively obstructing emergency vehicle access to 50 luxury homes. She used the word violent 3 times. Sheriff Coy Driscoll arrived at my porch at 4:50. Coy and I have known each other since 1971. He climbed the porch steps. He sat down in Cal's rocking chair without asking. "Bo." "Coy." "Mrs. Mallister says you destroyed HOA property and obstructed her access." "I removed a structure from my own road." "That's what I figured. You got the deed handy?" I went inside. I came back with the 1923 deed, the 1962 transfer, the 1986 transfer to me, and 4 years of property tax statements.
Coy read them slowly. He drank a glass of buttermilk Hattie had brought without being asked. Bo, this is your road. There is no question about it. There never was. I'll go talk to Mrs. Mallister. Coy, thank you. You hear from the developer yet?
Drayton stopped coming around when Cal told him no. He's been quiet. He's not going to stay quiet. I know. Coy stood up. He set the empty glass on the porch railing. Bo, I'm sorry about your father. I miss him too. He drove off toward Elkridge Estates. I never asked what he said to Stacy. He never told me. But the next day, the HOA Facebook page posted a long grievance about the difficulty of working with a county sheriff's department that doesn't respect the safety concerns of new residents. Coy's photograph was attached. 3 days later, the post was quietly deleted. On the second Tuesday of May, Brett Mallister arrived in a black Range Rover. Tall man, 51, soft handshake, the easy false smile of someone who had spent 22 years convincing other people's pension funds to give him money. He sat down in the same chair Coy had sat in. He didn't ask permission. Bo, I want to come at this man-to-man. I am authorized by the HOA, and out of my own pocket if it comes to that, to offer you $100,000 for a recorded easement on Whiskey Creek Trail. Permanent, filed with the county. We never have to talk again. I let the silence settle. Mr. Mallister, there is not a number you can offer me that buys this road. There is no version of this conversation where I sell my family's land. I'd appreciate if you didn't come back. His smile slipped half an inch. He set a business card on the porch railing. Bo, you can be a difficult man or a wealthy one. There is no third option. I picked up the card. I read it. I set it back down. Mr. Mallister, I prefer to be the man my father raised. He left. I burned the business card on the wood stove that night without reading the back. Hattie watched from the kitchen table without saying a word. She made me a fresh cup of coffee. The stove popped twice and settled. That was the night I understood the Mallisters were not going to leave this alone. People with money here, there is no number, and think you're negotiating. It takes them a long time, sometimes years, sometimes decades, to understand that the rest of the world is not for sale. Brett Mallister had not yet had that lesson. He was about to. Stacy's next move came at 8:06 on a Wednesday morning in the form of a 911 call. She told the dispatcher that the unstable rancher next door had threatened her child at the school bus stop, approached aggressively, made remarks about the child's safety, gestured in a way suggesting potential violence. At 8:06 on a Wednesday morning, I was 3 miles away on the north pasture riding fence with Russ. We had witnesses in every direction. Sheriff Driscoll responded to the call himself. He pulled the bus stop camera footage from the county school district by lunch.
The footage showed Stacy's son standing at the bus stop alone for 90 seconds, getting on the school bus and leaving. No rancher, no truck, no exchange. Coy issued Stacy a formal warning under Montana's false report statute. She did not apologize. She posted a long Facebook entry that afternoon titled, "When Small-Town Sheriffs Refuse to Protect Children." Coy's photograph appeared again. It was deleted by a board vote of 3-2 at the next HOA meeting. Stacy walked out of that meeting in tears, telling the board secretary that the community was being terrorized by an old white man with a personal grudge. I will not repeat what she said next, except to say that I knew what color Cal had been. I knew what color my mother had been. I knew what color my children were. Stacy Mallister was 48 years old, born in Darien, Connecticut, with 2 Ivy League degrees, married to a man worth north of $40 million. I felt on her behalf the small, uncomfortable thing a person feels when someone who has been handed everything decides they are the victim of someone who hasn't. The following Thursday afternoon, Holt Petton called me from his office in Livingston. Holt has been my surveyor since 1994. He inherited the practice from his father, who had surveyed for my father, who had surveyed for my grandfather. Bo, can you come in tomorrow? Bring everything. Every deed, every transfer, every tax record on the Tanner Cross going back to 1923. Holt, what did you find?
I'd rather show you in person. Bring Hattie if you want. 10 o'clock. I hung up. I sat at the kitchen table for a long time looking at the photograph of my father on the bookshelf. Cal Tanner had said one thing to me the week before he died that I'd carried with me ever since. Boy, sometimes the land protects itself. You just have to be standing still long enough to notice. I hadn't understood the sentence at the time. I thought he was tired. Holt's office sat above a feed store on Main Street in Livingston, in a brick building that had been a saddle shop in 1908. He had 3 plotters running when we walked in, a thermos of coffee half empty, and 3 printouts spread across the drafting table. "Sit down, Bo. Hattie." We sat.